Welcome to today's last Sundowner session under the Professional Advice stream. On behalf of the Financial Services Council, welcome. This session this afternoon is called Better Customer Service Through Better Systems. To start off, I'd like to thank on behalf of the FSC all our sponsors for this year's online ReGenerations conference. And in particular, I'd like to call out Chatswood Consulting for sponsoring and supporting this session this afternoon. Just a reminder that the session will be recorded and the FSC will make that recording available as soon as possible after this session. And can I also encourage you to take advantage of the Q&A area where you'd like to perhaps put any questions that you've got. I'd now like to hand over to Myles Allan, who's going to facilitate this session this afternoon and introduce you to all the speakers. So over to you, Myles.
Hey, thanks, Trisha, and thanks to the FSC for the opportunity to facilitate this session. Deep and abiding interest in all things systems related to the provision of advice. So my panelists today, and great pleasure to have them here, Justin Lim from Quashed, Rachel Strevens from Invsta, Royden Shotter from Planolitix, and Samuel Rees-Thomas from Rees-Thomas Financial. And I thought to kick off, we would just have a quick round the table, brief couple of minutes for them to introduce themselves, where they're from, and I guess their interest in this subject matter. So I guess over to you, Samuel, to kick off.
Hey, I'm Samuel Rees-Thomas here on the terrace in Wellington. I am a financial advisor, been in financial services 14 years, first in banking, then as an advisor for a larger Wellington firm for a few years, and founded my own firm 7 years ago. We're highly specialized in the risk and health insurance space, and we work with professionals and businesses, do a lot of key person and group insurance work. And I guess one of the key things about us is that when we launched, we were fully paperless and utilized tech to the most, really, from day dot. And we've remained with that as one of our key policies ever since. It's good to be here with you.
Awesome. Rachel?
Hi, thanks, Myles. So hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Strevens, founder and CEO of Invsta. So as a brief background, I guess, several years back, I was working for a number of years as a private wealth advisor for a few different companies here across New Zealand. And while in these roles, there were a number of common frustration points that kept coming up across the different companies in regards to things like customer service, and lack of tools to really engage customers online, and really slow, time-consuming manual processes and systems within the companies. And so that was really the starting point of our journey with Invsta, and our sort of challenge to look to help solving some of these issues facing the industry. So Invsta is a B2B fintech company. We provide a range of white label modules and interface solutions for wealth advisors, fund managers, and KiwiSaver providers across New Zealand. Our solutions are designed to really improve that client experience and engage customers in a digital format. We're always looking to delight and excite the end investors. We're always hoping to improve back office processes and efficiencies, and really look at how we can streamline and satisfy those compliance requirements. So that's sort of, I guess, the lens that I'll be coming at this from today. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Justin.
Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure. Thank you, Myles, for and it's a real pleasure to be here and amongst all the other panelists. So my name is Justin Lim. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Quashed. Essentially, with Quashed, we've created a brand new kind of digital insurance experience where people can bring together all your different insurances, whether it's general insurance, life insurance, health insurance, pet insurance, and for the lucky few, boat insurance. You can kind of bring together your whole world of insurance onto this one platform where you can get a really good understanding of how much you're spending, when's your next renewal coming up, what you're covered for, and we've also done some cool things to help people explore insurances that they might be missing. So I guess, my background, as with, a couple of the panelists that have spoken before, I've spent time in financial services. I was working for both ANZ and BNZ in kind of digital and innovation roles. And about 3 years ago, when I got married, I kind of got, fronted into this frustration of not having all my insurances in one place. I absolutely had no idea, what insurance I had, what was I spending, when was my renewal coming up. And so I set about creating Quashed, this online digital experience, essentially. So I'm really excited to be here, to be able to share my experience and kind of my views on customers and systems and I guess the world of digital financial services, really. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. And Royden, over to you.
Thank you, Myles. So I'm going to come at today's session with a little bit of two hats on. I'm the creator and founder of Planolitix, but I'm also a financial planner. I have a practice and working out of Parnell. Been doing that more than 20 years. I'm a CFP, one of the dwindling number of certified financial planners in New Zealand. And really, as I went about my own business and built my own practice, there was just a lack of tools in the market. So I waded into Excel, as a number of other advisors have done over the years, and built a piece of kit, but I never really stopped. And it got to the point where other advisors started saying things like, Royden, when can I have a bit of access to your stuff? And I say, well, maybe when I get it out of Excel. So it took me a decent number of years to actually find some developers to help me do that. But I did. I found a small external team who have been amazing. And after 3 years of development, we soft launched in July last year. And advisors have just been kind of kicking us around like a football between themselves and their mates ever since. Massey University have actually recently picked us up at the beginning of the year to run alongside their new financial planning degree that they've got running as a major alongside their finance degree. And yeah, we're just flat out developing and educating advisors on the kit, what you can do, how you can really upgrade your business and really take it to the next level.
Okay, fantastic, Royden. That's a great start. Really qualified panel and absolute minimum of sales and marketing. It's off to a rip-roaring start. So thank you, guys. We've got a number of formal questions that we're going to sort of put to the panel. Would invite some active Q&A as we go through. I've said to Trisha at the start, I'm not fielding any personal questions about my lack of grooming, etc. It's lockdown. Yeah, really, we got 34 people on, so that's a good audience and really looking for some participation and challenge, in fact. So we'll kick off with I guess a fairly basic one is, what does the customer actually want, and how does this differ across generations? It's particularly around, I guess, provision of digital tools, and depending on your perception of who your customer is, whether that's your advisor or your advisor's customer or both. And it's that, what do they want and how are you finding out? And I sort of pitched that one to Rachel in the first instance.
Thanks, Myles. So I guess, within our businesses, one of the key things that we're driven to do and to bring to the market is tools and digital sort of platforms and solutions that increase accessibility and enable better financial outcomes, both for the financial service providers that we're working with, but also their end customers or their end investors. So as a part of this, we do provide a significant amount of time and effort really digging down to understand and track investor attitudes and behavior. So, I mean, this is sort of a session about technology, so it's probably pretty obvious, but one of the biggest shifts that we have seen in recent years is the uptake of technology and the move towards digital systems and platforms. If you look back sort of a few years, initially this move was really driven by the millennial generation. But what we are seeing now is that customers across all generations are demanding access to technology platforms for their wealth and investment management. A good example of that is Betterment in the US, a leading Roboadvice provider over there, says that over a third of their customers are actually over the age of 50. So I think while there has been a lot of sort of emphasis on the need for digital platforms and tools and systems to service that new or next generation sort of millennial audience, I think it's really important for people to actually understand that there is that is sort of making waves across other generations as well. And there is actually a pretty high expectation from other generations that they do have access to good quality technology and systems.
There's some great research out there around what being millennial actually means, and I think it's no longer an age group cohort. It's a mindset. I think about the stuff my father, he's 77, runs off his iPhone. And his expectations will be shaped by the ease of doing that. I know, Royden, you had some views on this one as well. So I'll put that to you.
Yeah, thanks. So for me, I guess I initially approached this from a slightly advisory perspective, in the sense that it doesn't matter who I'm in front of, whether they're 27 or 77. Everybody wants to know the answer to one thing, and it's, am I going to be okay? So while people tend to use the internet for research and to find things out to drive their own conclusions or help prepare them perhaps for that next step before they get advice, they still need that big picture of someone who can bring everything together and say, well, are we on track? Are we off track? It's that navigation piece. So am I going to be okay is a really, really central piece to what my software does, in the sense that as a lifetime cash flow modeling tool, it extrapolates all the things that might be going on in your world. And of course, regardless of your age and stage, it's going to be different, but the software just doesn't care. It just extrapolates whatever's needed. Now, that's not to say that we wouldn't necessarily need guidance on that journey, but that's why it's such a powerful tool in the hands of an advisor.
So, Rod, that sounds like it's you're working off empirical evidence, i.e. your advisors are coming to you and going, well, here's a gap, can you fill it? And I'm presuming they're getting that feedback from their client base as well, or how's that working for you?
It's actually more the other way around. It's actually more that it was the gap that I saw. But it's not like I've invented lifetime cash flow modeling or anything. I mean, overseas, it's really, really common. It's just that a lot of the bigger players, and typically it was purely financial planning product, and mine isn't. Mine's a lot broader than that because our market's so small. But because our market is small, that's why we never got the tools. So the entire industry has more or less just limped along, with education on one side and then primarily persuasion and sales training on the other. And there's this I see this gap in the middle that brings the two together. To really drive those sort of good customer outcomes. And that's the game changer. When advisors are curious about the software and they say, hey, tell me about it, give me a demo kind of thing. And I say, all right, well, let's do that. And I tell them, look, you're going to get a level of client engagement that you probably haven't had before, because you're going to take somebody on the journey of their life, and it's really going to spin their wheels, and it's a lot of fun to do. And so I've been getting a lot of warm fuzzies basically from that, advisors coming back using it and then going, oh my God, everything you said was true. And it's like, well, I did tell you. And they said, yeah, but I never believed you.
Okay, awesome. And I guess second question, how important is speed, convenience, knowledge, help, and friendly services to customers? And I think the key part of that, particularly the friendly services, how do you deliver that in a digital format? I'll put that out to Justin in the first instance, and then sort of round the room, if I may.
Yeah, thanks, Myles. I think that's absolutely key. And, convenience, I mean, adding on to kind of the first question, they've just touched on really, convenience, speed, knowledgeable help and friendly service. It kind of cuts across not just financial services, but when I look across everything today, no matter whether it's online grocery shopping or just online shopping in general, or, the way we access movies and dramas through Netflix, for example, it's all about speed and convenience. So I think we're definitely seeing that flow through into financial services, and that desire from a customer's perspective for that. And in terms of your question around how do we deliver that in digital format when we're talking about financial services, the way I think about it really is, we really put ourselves in the customer's shoes, and even though it's kind of digital, the format, it's still designed by, a human. It's still designed by, someone in my team. And so when we put ourselves through that process, we ask ourselves, is this fast? Can we reduce the question set in terms of getting the customer to the outcome that they want by asking the minimal number of questions? Because the way Quashed works is that you literally drop off all your different insurance policies onto the platform, and our technology essentially sucks sucks it all up, and it presents you with this dashboard. And so really, if we had to get people to manually input all those data fields, it's definitely not speed, and it's not convenient. So we'd see a lot of people drop off. But that was actually our starting point. That's where we started, and people have said, hey, this is kind of painful. Can you make it faster? And so we've essentially developed this novel technology where it kind of, sucks everything out and presents it to you in a dashboard. So I'd say it's absolutely crucial. And the way we're delivering that is really by, putting ourselves into the customer's shoes when we're designing for that experience.
Okay, awesome. But before anybody else jumps on that, I'd probably add another subline into that question is, how are you dealing with decreased attention spans over time? Before anyone else picks that one up. Because it's a thing, isn't it?
What do you mean by decreased? Can you specify?
Sure. If you think about I'll try and remember the stats off the top of my head. Bank Direct in the UK has, in order to sign up for that, you've got to do 128 clicks. Revolut, I think, is something in the order of 28. And that is seen as one of the, there's a whole load of stuff going on with Revolut, but that's just another thing that makes it a far superior product to Bank Direct. Yeah. So, if I can't get an app on my phone and get it working within 25 seconds, even as an old person, I'm going, well, that's a really negative experience. So
you're not an old person, Myles. You're not an old person.
Thanks, mate. It's just a small picture in the top left-hand corner, which makes me appear younger than I am. Thank you. Anyway. So, any other views on that particular one?
Yeah, look, I think mobile accessibility is absolutely key. We've sort of gone through a transition period, and a lot of companies and sort of providers now are sort of operating and have sort of a reasonable offering within that web-based application space. But, the future really is mobile, and that's where the speed and the convenience really comes through in terms of that convenience factor. Everyone's got their mobile in their back pocket the whole time. There was a recent report out by EY that expects by next year that over 46% of all wealth activities will happen on a mobile phone, and that's a decrease on websites by 20%. So you really can see the shift sort of happening there, and the importance of factoring that mobile capability, even if it's a web-based app, but sort of having that actually work and function really well on a mobile. And I guess, sort of the fintechs play to that well, but I think the incumbents across the industry have probably got still a lot of catching up to do to sort of make the shift now, if they are playing in that web-based space now, to be able to bring that through to mobile as well.
We've developed our piece so that an advisor can invite a client in and complete a lot of the data even before a client meets with them, which is handy for the advisor. But equally, once the client has been run through a session, they get, not all of them, but there's a decent percentage that actually gets super interested. So me with my advisory hat on, what I tend to find is there's probably about 30 to 40% of people that want to retain that access, and we just give them that, and they can go in and have a play and do modeling. And often what will happen is that on Sunday they've had a wine and a sit down and a chat, and then I'll get an email, and Monday morning I've got a bunch of emails to feedback about the what they've done, and have they done it right, and do we want to talk about it, kind of thing. And so it's bringing people together. And in terms of click fatigue, I hear you, Myles, but in this case, once they've had that engagement piece, sometimes I can't stop the buggers from clicking too much. There'll be times I go in there and there's like 10 different scenarios, and I'm like, dude, what have you been doing? Well, we thought about this, we thought about that. It was like, okay, how many of these do we really need? And we have to pare it back to their actual world again and go, right, now what do you seriously want to consider and talk about here? But it's nice because they do sort of see me as navigator on that journey, which is good. So yeah, for us, that delivery, I mean, they've got access to it 24/7 whenever they want it. But it does make the advisor engagement then much more meaningful, because it's no longer about the product. It's no longer about the insurances or the wealth bit or KiwiSaver or whatever. Those are kind of subset products that just kind of fall out the bottom of the overall engagement, which I personally think is how it should be. The advisor I think at its pinnacle concept is there to help guide someone on their way. Sure, facilitate all those other financial bits and pieces, but equally stop them from doing dumb stuff, and just basically be there as a wall to bounce ideas off and do due diligence, and basically have someone in their corner.
Can I just chip in here? From the perspective of an advisor, something I've been reflecting on a lot, and this ties into question 1, question 2 with regards to knowledgeable help, and question 3. But with question 1, what does the customer want? The customer really just wants to be empowered. The customer wants to be empowered to make a good and informed decision. And we know that one of the biggest problems we have in this country is lack of financial literacy, underinsurance, and it's really difficult to get up to speed on all of those matters quickly without good tech, without good graphics, without good tools. And that's something that your tool does well, Royden. That's something that your tool does well, Justin. And I think we need more of this, and we need more integration between these tools and the advice process, because at the end of the day, these tools actually help both the customer and the advisor to have a more human, more needs-based conversation, and actually get to the bottom of what the client needs and fulfill it. It's really interesting times, actually.
And I guess, Royden, you've raised a really interesting point, which I'm sure the panel's aware of. There's some great research kicking around and probably still being done. ANZ commissioned some about 3 years ago in Australia, and Bank BBV in Spain at a similar time frame, around the impact of the provision of a sandpit facility in a digital tool and the impact that had on positive uptake of the service after the event. So there's a couple of barriers that overcomes. It's I can play with this and nobody's looking over my shoulder judging me for doing dumb stuff. And I can then get a level of familiarity with the product, the concept, et cetera, before I may then take the step of talking to a person face to face. I will have some knowledge and be able to speak on those topics without looking foolish, I think was the essence of it. Anything further to add to that particular question? And I guess the next one we've got here is, you've already covered quite a bit of this, but if there's any more sort of reflections on this, it's basically, what problem are you trying to solve? We've talked about information, education, market access, the ability to transact at will. And I've thrown this one in there because I'm intrigued in the answer if any of you got one. Is insurance, particularly life insurance. It's one of those things that tends not to sell itself. It's got to be sold. I mean, the only time you go looking for life insurance is when you've got your mortgage provider breathing down your neck going, you must be covered for your liability in the event bad things happen. So any reflections on that question? And I'll put that one back to Royden on that one.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the primary functions, we've got a whole section dedicated to it, is that concept of insurance needs analysis. Historically, in the absence of other tools, and mine's not the only lifetime cash flow modeling product out there. Partners Life have Edmonds, Omnimax, I believe, also has something along those lines too. But other than this small subset, historically, there's been a lot of rules of thumb out there, and maybe some, wisdom passed down and from mentors in terms of sales tips and tricks and stuff that I just don't think necessarily flies in a modern era. And CRMs, and not throwing them under the bus at all, because we all need them, and implementation and workflow is critical. But I have a real problem with limited set question sets as a way to find out or engineer what somebody might need in terms of insurance, and then call that a needs analysis. Planolitix has an analysis engine. Effectively, it uses lifetime cash flow analysis to understand and calculate the relative needs, given all things, mortgage size, income, expenditure. It's got an investment property portfolio section, and all of that data overflows and relays back to the personal finances to then understand, given a scenario where somebody dies prematurely, or there's a trauma-like incident or a disability, there's actual analysis going on behind it that can then help the advisor come to a set of conclusions, but quite beautifully and immediately back that up. The analysis is going on underlying the whole time, but equally, of course, what's expected now is also that client understanding piece as well. The client understands why they need the types of cover and the amounts of cover they need because they've gone through that process. In fact, pointedly, the advisor couldn't do that process without the feedback from the client on that journey. So I find I don't need to sell insurance. It's more a case of understanding what's going on. And I'm very much on the same side of the table. It's not a banging heads kind of thing, or I'm not seen as a salesperson at all. It's very much a consultancy driven kind of thing, and we're all trying to figure it out together. So a bit of a game changer for a lot of people, advisors who come on board and have been quite transactional, using soft skills to sell, and it pretty much changes their world.
Sales is simply the result of a robust advice process.
Yeah, 100.
And good education, good empowerment. Sounds simple, but it's really true. I mean, I'm always surprised how many advisors don't even communicate claim probability to their clients as part of the process. But, even that part of the conversation only comes after drawing out the data required to have that needs analysis conversation.
Yeah, look, great call, Sam. And equally, the concept of claims probability on that balance, that tipping point of cost versus benefit versus probability. What is an appropriate amount for someone to have based on their age and stage and their financial, not just their financial position right now, but where their future finances are going to be as well, because then that starts to speak to stepped versus level premiums and what might be appropriate to pay a little bit extra, but hold that cover for the long term, or what might be appropriate to have on stepped premiums because you're going to cancel it because largely things are looking good, and you can actually tell that have a time frame around when they're going to get good buy.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. So we've got a bit of interest from the floor, and I'd like to hope it was prompted by the mention of life insurance and the difficulty of selling it. Somebody's asking here, it would be great to hear Justin's view on the behaviour of insurance clients on Quashed.
Yeah, no, thanks, Myles. Thanks for that question. I think it ties really nicely into that last question we just touched on. So Quashed is about how do we engage customers better using a digital platform and experience like what we've created. So we're still learning in terms of how customers are actually interacting with the platform. So we started with a really simple proposition going, hey, people want to have this complete one view of all the insurances in one place. And so that was really where we started. But since then, we've also had kind of, our customers or insurance clients coming on board and saying, hey, can you actually help me understand, a particular type of insurance, or, is there something better out there compared to what I have? And so we've actually then continually built out that experience a bit further to include a real simple sort of basic insurance checkup to say, hey, for example, you might have life insurance, but maybe you don't have income protection. So that's something to think about. So we provide very general type of information around that. And the idea, I guess, with tying back into the problem that we're trying to solve is this disengagement. And so if we can get people more engaged in the time on which they're spending on the platform, then I think it sort of positions them really well to have a conversation with, whether it's an insurer or an advisor, and that's really kind of what we're quite excited about. How can we get people excited about insurance? I know traditionally, that's not most people's view on insurance, that it's not very exciting, and I think Royden touched on that earlier. How do you almost make it fun? And it's great to hear that that's being picked up at Massey University as well. I think the younger we can get to people actually being exposed to insurance and understanding the importance of insurance, the better it is for us further down once they get a job and have their first property and have kids and so on and so forth. So coming back to that question, I guess we're still really learning from how customers are interacting, and constantly people are asking us for new things on the platform. But I would say the best thing to do is probably go check out the platform and see how you kind of find it and what else you would like to kind of see on there.
Okay, great, thanks, Justin. Making some good time. We've got 4 questions left and plenty of time for a bit more Q&A. I'll direct this one to Sam in the first instance. How is your technology, or the use of the technology you have, improving the quality and commercial viability of advice delivery? And this is both reduced costs to serve and enhanced advisor productivity, and also that reduction in compliance costs.
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm really passionate about good advice, and we believe that the precious moments when it comes to good advice involve a conversation between an advisor and a client. For a number of years now, there's been the doomsday conversation around compliance, it's been compliance this and compliance that, and it's been very scary. A lot of people have just become really afraid of compliance. But frankly, compliance is a result of a good advice process, good systems, and what we've strived to do in our day-to-day operation is make sure that we use technology wherever possible to be compliant automatically. I've been reflecting a lot on how there's kind of this kind of religion of the CRM that people talk about all the time. But the CRMs are great and they're really important, but they're not the problem solver for every element of your business. We've introduced a few key things in our business on a day-to-day basis that have just revolutionized the way we work. For example, we use a email client called Front, which allows us to have conversations underneath an email and to discuss what's required. The support staff member can ask me a question, I can reply, and that email can be dealt with. I can also assign those emails away to other staff members. They can assign emails to me. And we've got an audit trail of the entire workings process that we've undertaken to deal with this matter. It's all there for an auditor to have a look at. In addition, all our meetings now are scheduled through Calendly, and when a client books in a meeting with us, all of our licensing information, our engagement terms are automatically there. The client agrees to these, and they have to read them as well in order to book in the meeting. What we've been finding is that actually they have been reading them, because we've designed it in such a way that that they kind of have to without proceed. And then I'm finding that all of these things that we've been doing have actually resulted in longer and more detailed and more personable conversations with clients when it comes to actually the advice process. And I think that's the key, really. Are we using technology to make our human-to-human time more productive, more valuable? Are we sending out the Planolitix link to a client before we meet with them so they can input data, rather than spending half of your meeting just inputting data into a tool? Because these clients, they can do that stuff. They can do it before meeting with you, and it's it's not that sort of activity that makes your time valuable. It's actually the conversation around advice. So that's the sort of key message I have.
Okay, great. And I'll put that one out to Rachel and Royden as well, and just really keen to get your views on because I know we talk a lot about the democratization of financial services and the ability to bring better advice to more people, for want of a better term, and how technology platforms are enabling that. I'll put that to Rachel in the first instance.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think when we're talking about technology to deliver advice or to provide advice, there's two different things to consider. One of them being digital tools that can help sort of the advisor or the human advisor process in terms of a lot of the things that Samuel's just talked through. There's a lot that can be done in that sort of space to actually sort of set those processes in stone, or not really in stone, but sort of format a lot of those processes so that they do actually happen in a structured manner in the background automatically, without necessarily having to sort of have a lot of manual data entry or sort of paper forms being filled in and then manual data entry and things like that happening. So I think there is a lot that can be done with workflow processes and sort of intelligent systems to help actually support advisors on their advice process and their advice journey. Of course, the other side of that, or the other big part of that, I would say would be to be able to serve the mass market, lower value customer through digital advice or robo-advice type processes. And if you're sort of looking at those types of channels, all of a sudden you're opening up the commercial feasibility to actually service a much, much wider audience and have that feed through potentially as a starting point to your higher value products later on down the track. I don't think we've seen really too much sort of come through in New Zealand here in the way of digital advice or robo-advice, but I think it is really the perfect tool to be able to service, for example, KiwiSaver investors, to be able to sort of automate a lot of that, put a lot of those tools into the customer's hand. And of course, you probably want to have sort of some touch points or handoff points through that process, so that if customers are coming through and they need a bit of extra help, then you can hand them through to an advisor. But I think it can be quite a good lead generation tool to have those kind of things for that mass market type product or type approach, and obviously servicing sort of a much wider audience.
Yeah, you see, I guess there's actually most recently interesting article in the Sunday Star Times, of all places, which was right on the money. They'd called out a couple of things. The concept of incubation, i.e. targeting people who will have, I guess, you think about the higher value customer providers, they have thresholds over which you need to get before it's economically viable to give you the standard advisory service. But the robo-advice, digital tools as a means of setting up some sort of incubator service that familiarizes people with the idea of advice and the more quality end of the market, if you will. I'm going to annoy somebody by saying that, and also there's how does our industry deal with intergenerational wealth transfer? Because we talked about the millennials. They have an expectation which is perhaps not met by a more traditional advice tool or advice service. I mean, are you seeing much of either of those things? And I'll put that to Rachel and Royden.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, from what we're seeing is that there is definitely sort of understanding and comprehension going on that, hey, we need to do something to be able to target that next generation of investor, whether it's the wealth through the wealth transfer from parents down to sort of children, and how we're actually going to make sure that we can attract and keep those kids, because the way that they sort of interact and receive advice is completely different to what their parents would have been used to. So I think we are starting to have a lot more of those conversations with companies here, and there's certainly a much wider understanding and appreciation that to sort of effectively remain relevant in the future, there's going to be something happening in this space. Yeah.
Any additional comment there, Royden?
Yeah, potentially a bunch, particularly around the concept of robo-advice. I think sometimes it's a bit of a stretch when someone says, "Oh, I've got we've developed a robo-advice product," and you scratch beneath the thin veneer, and you strike a limited question set, making massive assumptions, and then simply just happen to be delivering a product through a digital portal. I'm not sure that's advice. And doesn't necessarily make for a good customer outcome either. I mean, look, I appreciate there is this seesaw, right? Because you've got advice in isolation, which might be good advice, or it might be bad advice because it's only in the isolation of that one thing that they were looking at, whether it's wealth or whether it's insurance or whatever it might be. And again, but on the other side of that seesaw, you've got that balance of really, we should be able to get products simply, and that product delivery shouldn't have to be hard. And something is better probably than nothing. And then where do you then balance that with bringing the advisor in? So, having said all that, while Planolitix is a pretty sophisticated tool, I'm more than happy to let my clients at it. And it's pretty intuitive, but we've now started building a stripped back version to do the very thing you were talking about, Rachel, basically that engagement piece with somebody's KiwiSaver or wider finances, wealth, and the idea is that we'll be able to plug in whatever. I've always seen sort of Planolitix as maybe the hub which you could toggle your different bits of information on or off, and it's just over time, and this is what's really great, and among the fintech community in New Zealand, a lot of these smaller players, we all sort of know each other and talk to each other, don't we, Rachel? We keep seeing each other in the same rooms all the time, and we end up chatting and going, well, when can we talk, sort of thing. And there's been a bit of that, and whether it's been sort of like Vincent McCarthy from CloudCheck going, hey, look, as soon as you want that ID verification on your stuff, let me know. It's like, okay, I will let you know when I'm ready. And of course, everyone's getting more and more ready, aren't they? The ability for open banking is going to be a game changer. And once we can get that digital ID piece sorted, I mean that's obviously a conversation set in itself, but the ability to swap data or hold hands with other bits of tech really is going to be massively, massively, massively enabling when it just gets that little bit easier to do. And that's starting to happen. So, future's pretty exciting in that regard.
Yeah, and there's some great precedents from offshore for that and what can be achieved.
Absolutely.
And again, that's a tricky one. I sort of roll back to the Revolut example. There's some great stats around market penetration enabled by open banking, amongst other things. They went into Ireland in 2019. There's 6.1 million people in Ireland. By 2021, 1 million of those were Revolut customers. Wow. So, and that's driven off the back of I can keep my existing bank, but I can tap into them through the Revolut front end through open banking. It's a double-edged sword, and I guess one of those that your traditional banks would be showing some degree of nervousness around. So it's a bit of a Pandora's box.
They certainly are here. I think, actually, Sam, it might have been you that told me this. I can't remember. Someone told me this. They said that out of the OECD countries, there was only 2 countries that didn't have open banking. It was us and like Israel or something.
Okay. We've got some intent somewhere, I believe. I'm cognizant of time, and I want to reach out to Justin again on this one, and it fits quite neatly into the last point there. Where does the personalization in your tools, the human touch, play a role in such a digitally focused world? And how have you accommodated the variable desire for this in the customer journey? And I'm thinking about, I used a couple of examples of this. My members of my family are introverts. One of them works in sales. By the time she gets to the end of the day, she doesn't want to talk to anybody. She wants to be completely online digital. And we all know people who are at the opposite end of the spectrum who can't wait to get in front of people and have a face-to-face conversation. So I'll put that to Justin in the first instance, if I may.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thanks, Myles. Introvert in sales. I was just thinking, where was that going? But so it's.
I do wonder myself.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is that, I think it's a point I made earlier, touched on, that all these digital experiences that we've created are created by humans. And so I would say all throughout, there's obviously that intent and that desire to create this optimal interaction. But I completely get your point around, some people would prefer to deal completely online versus some people would like to deal with sort of this hybrid sort of approach where, I would like to do some things online, but, maybe it's the advice part that gets handed off to an advisor, and it's like, hey, guide me through this because it's more complex, or just help me answer a few things. And so the way in which we've built Quashed is that I don't know if you've been stuck, but I digress a little bit, but I don't know if you've been stuck on certain websites where it's so sort of just purely online focus, and you just get stuck between a chatbot and an FAQs page. And it's the most frustrating thing because you go around and around and around and you can never come out of that loop. So it's something that we intentionally do. Want to do.
Well-known vacuum cleaner manufacturing has that issue.
Yeah, so...
All I wanted was the wee brush for the corners. You just can't find it. Sorry.
No, and that's exactly what we've tried to avoid as well. We always wanted people to be able to click and just, book a time, as soon as you get stuck, just book a time. And we've actually had so many of our customers do that, where they book onto what we call a setup call, a VIP call, where it's just a 15-minute call. And I've had people, walk me through the spreadsheets in which they've kept the insurances policy details on and said, how do I take all this information and put it onto Quashed? Because this is amazing. This is something I've been looking for all my life type of thing. And so, we've kind of tried to balance, creating a really intuitive experience and also still having the ability for the customer to drop out at any point in that, that process where they're uncomfortable, to get the help they need. Because again, it's just trying to avoid that kind of loop. So yeah, I guess for us, I see, the experience that we've created to be this hybrid sort of approach where it's both digital, but there's definitely, human touch points all throughout. In the service that we provide, essentially, Myles.
Great. Any other views on that? I know.
I think.
Rachel.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think that it's really, really important to make sure that those personal touch points are built into the systems and the processes there, unless of course you're sort of are taking the approach that you're purely digital and you don't, and that's sort of your complete approach. But I think the technology allows for much more value-added personal touch points, so that all of that sort of mundane administration-y type things, where an advisor sort of might have been spending time with a customer, going through and gathering that data, by putting a lot of that in the hands of technology. Now we're actually able to really allow the advisors to spend their time on those value-added type activities, and really sort of focus on those type of things as opposed to sort of more of the mundane admin type things, which means that advisors have got a whole lot more time sort of freeing up to service potentially sort of a larger number of customers. But yeah, look, I think it's really, really important to weave those touch points into whatever technology and whatever sort of systems and solutions that you're looking at using. There's a number of ways that can be done. As you said, you don't really want to get stuck in that chatbot FAQ type situation, but live chat can be integrated where you can sort of automatically live chat with an actual person or an advisor, or sort of the automated, click on the button to actually contact us now, and as you said, calendar bookings, all those types of things can be integrated pretty seamlessly these days.
Oh, Sam, I know you had a view. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, well, we've always used tech and human touch in tandem. I remember right at the beginning of Google Forms, when it sort of became a thing that people used in their business, we incorporated a custom Google form into the renewal process when policies were going up to renewal. But the thing is, we didn't just send the Google form out at renewal. We called, and if we didn't manage to get in touch with the client, texted the client, said, hey, we got a 2-minute renewal questionnaire coming your way, fill it out, because we want to make sure we're doing the best possible job for you. And we had like a 75% fill out rate of these forms.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was insane. It was insane, and that hasn't changed. We've got a slightly different form now, but the key was that they knew that the form was coming, and they knew that it was in their best interest to fill it out. It wasn't me that was making these calls. It was my support staff, right? It's not in my best interest to be making those calls. And fast forward to now, once the form is filled out, depending on the client's answers, the client gets sent automatically a 20-minute initial review, I guess, triage call that they can have with me. And in that link, that Calendly link, it's prepositioned that if we identify that it needs to be a proper, larger advice meeting, then we'll have it, and we'll book in another call. But clients are booking in their own meetings, and I think we need to sort of give clients the benefit of the doubt a little bit more around them actually knowing when those triggers are popping up and when they need advice as well. I mean, clients are smart, but they need to be given the ability to actually seek advice, you know. And it's funny because even though some clients are in long-standing advice relationships, they'll forget that they can actually access advice. And so just reminding them, you know, it's pretty simple.
I love the triage phone call. That's cool. I not meaning to be derogatory in any sense, but the financial bartender, as it were, we sometimes they don't want to talk about anything other than their world, right? They just want to talk about their life and what's going on in it, and we're kind of there to listen in a professional sense, as someone that knows them and what's going on in their kids' worlds and the challenges that it's going on, and you know, and their medical problems. And you know, we know a lot of information, and we really are we really are often there for the long haul, and you know, and they kind of love us, which is why it's such a fulfilling and such a great job. And obviously, so there's that, right? There's the pure person end. And then at the other end, it's like, sometimes I just want to research the hell out of stuff. Sometimes I just want to jump online and just learn and not talk to anyone. But I guess for me, the pinnacle is always that blend, right? It's that advisor that has the tools, that has the equipment, you know, whether it's a mechanic with a scan tool who can diagnose what's actually wrong with my car. You know, when you find that guy or girl, you want to hang on because they're a problem solver for you. And I think that's what financial advisors and the best constructs are for people. You know, advisors with good tools, you get that lovely blend of tech and intelligent advisory. And I think in terms of good outcomes, I don't know if it gets much better than that.
Yeah. That's good call. Some good points. I just, cognizant of time, I just want to roll on to the next couple of questions. And we just had an audience question which ties in very neatly with the next one. So how are you keeping pace with the digital landscape, not just in your own world? So financial services digitization has arguably lagged behind other industries. And I think this harks back to the point about people's expectations are set by every digital platform they use. And how often do you review your digital strategy to make sure that it matches the ever-increasing availability of technology as well as your clients' needs? And I'll put that one back to Rachel in the first instance, if I may.
Yeah, sure. So I guess in our world, because we're providing tech, well, we're a fintech business. We're providing fintech solutions to other companies. So for us, it's really, really critical that actually we're right at the forefront of what's possible within the world of fintech. It wouldn't be much good if you went to a fintech provider and they weren't sort of up to date with the latest, digital options or integrations or sort of ways of doing things. So for us, it's critical. We spend a lot of time sort of in research, looking at other industries, particularly big tech for us, and reading reports, digesting global sort of trends. That's a pretty big focus for us. In terms of big tech, I think that's a really interesting play to watch because, big tech, Google, Amazon's, all those guys are already encroaching into financial services in many various different ways. And, there is actually a lot of data out that says that because those brands are so well known, consumers out there and investors out there are actually quite more than willing to give it a go if big tech companies do come out with financial service offerings or wealth offerings. So I think that it's really, really important to actually keep an eye on what those guys are doing. You know, they've got sort of the smartest brains that are out there effectively, and they're often leading the trends in many different sort of areas that they're involved with, and bringing those through to financial services as well. But look, for us, it's about, you know, what are the coolest apps out there at the moment, whatever industry they're in, you know, what are the coolest sort of things that people are doing? What are the newest integrations that mean that our compliance processes can be, you know, cut in half again, potentially. So it's a pretty big role and pretty big thing for us.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Rachel. Any other comments on that? So cognizant of time, we're down to our last 5 minutes, and there's just the one question to go. And yeah, if there's anything else to come in from the participants, be very keen to table that in the time we have. Any other comments around the digital strategy, digital landscape, etc.?
It sounds super geeky, but I spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos of tech reviews, and I love it. I love it.
We're not here to judge, Sam.
There's some amazing YouTubers out there, you know. And I think what happens is when you start sort of just looking at these things, these sort of videos and presentations, plenty of which are really engaging, you just start to pick up on stuff by osmosis. I also follow a number of individuals forefront in the tech space on Twitter. I try to do that on LinkedIn. And I think one of the problems we have in our industry is that we often tend to only follow people in our own industry. It's a little bit incestuous, and it's a bit problematic, and we miss out on some of the really cool new innovations that people are doing. Mm-hmm. And so I think the key is, one of the keys anyway, is to not just focus on financial services, because at the end of the day, tech doesn't have favorites, you know. It's there for anyone that wants to use it, and if we start using it, then we'll benefit from it. And we can also, with most of these tools now, customize them for us specifically. And often we don't need to build something new. We can take something that's already available and utilize it for our own purposes.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's a good perspective, Sam. Thanks. So we've just got the one question to go, which I'm going to fire this to Justin. There's consternation across customers around giving up personal data, and obviously that's the lifeblood of Quashed. And this is around vulnerabilities to cyber attack, hacking, etc. And I guess you've also got the accommodation of privacy laws, and we've talked about the open data interchange. Just really curious about your comments around that, Justin.
You know, it's
in the ensuing 3 minutes.
It's a great question, Myles. It's a big topic. It could be a whole session on itself, but really for us, as you mentioned, you know, the core of what we do is sort of information and data. And I think, you know, around that question around is there consternation across customers giving up their data, and obviously on the other side, I think the way we think about it is really today, customers know that in exchange, if you can get something valuable, then they're pretty happy to have that exchange in terms of putting their information onto the platform. And if you're able to serve and use that information well and actually give them value back in return, I think they're more than happy with that. And just being really, really transparent around the kind of data that we actually hold, giving them really, you know, simple, transparent access to understanding, hey, how are we actually managing their data? I think that's really key. So I think the main point I can really talk to is really just, you know, that value exchange, really, if that exists and if it's really clear to the customers. I don't think that there's necessarily a lot of there's too much fear or people not wanting to give up their information. As long as they can see that clear value exchange, they're pretty happy to do it. And then on the open data side, I think, that you touched on earlier, I think that's really, really interesting and exciting, because that's a more secure way potentially of kind of, being able to share information across organizations. And from a customer's perspective, you can create this beautiful seamless journey. And I think, personally, I'm really, really excited about that happening across different financial services, and maybe to Sam's point as well, outside of, immediate kind of financial services. When I look at, industries like the travel industries, the airlines and things like that, I think there's a lot that we can learn, or telcos as well. They've got a bunch of data there as well. So for me, it's this really amazing, interesting world that we're starting to step into that presents actually a lot of opportunity for all of us. And I think the more we understand the better it is for us and our customers.
That's awesome. Thank you so much to the panel. We're out of time now, but you guys have made my job incredibly easy, and you've surfaced some incredibly good points. And thank you all very, very much for your time. And I'll hand back to Trisha.
And look, thanks, Myles. I couldn't agree more. It's been a very fresh, very honest and energetic session. It's amazing when you hear a whole lot of panelists like yourself talk so collaboratively about client engagement and just the insights and the tools and the solutions that are available to clients. So congratulations to all of you. It's been a fabulous session. I think we probably could have gone on for a few hours yet. So thank you to all of you. I'd also like to just remind everybody that next week we are closing down the conference, and we've got two fabulous sessions on Monday the 13th. We've got a session at 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock on financial advertising and the new guidelines. And then the following day, on the 14th of December, between 3:30 and 4:30, we're going to talk about some Financial Services Council research launch around women and financial being in New Zealand. So the conference has gone exceedingly well over the last few weeks, and today has just been a great session to close our Sundowner sessions under the professional advice. So thanks to Myles, thanks to everybody for attending, and as I said, there will be a recording available later. So take care, everyone.